Hello guys, welcome back. So the Cleveland Browns have officially handed Deshaun Watson the keys. But make no mistake, this feels like a short leash, not a long-term commitment. Watson has the experience, the massive contract, and now the opportunity to prove he can still play at an NFL level. But if he struggles against Jacksonville and Tampa Bay, the pressure could become absolutely brutal, and Shedeur Sanders could be waiting for his chance in Week 3. For Watson, this may be the biggest opportunity of his career. He needs to shut up the critics with his performance, protect the football, move the offense, and prove he can still be a difference maker. For Cleveland, however, this is about finding out whether Watson has anything left while preparing for the future. And with the Browns already calling the Watson deal a massive mistake, the clock is clearly ticking. One bad stretch could change everything, and Shedeur Sanders could be the biggest beneficiary.
Quarterback yesterday. He'll get the snaps under center to start the season, beating out second-year QB Shedeur Sanders. Watson and head coach Todd Monken both spoke on the decision yesterday. Take a listen.
Deshaun is going to start against Jacksonville. Took in the full body of work over the course of off-season to training camp to the games, the joint practice, and ultimately felt like to start the season on the road, Deshaun gave us the best chance to move the ball and score points. I mean, that's really what it's about.
There's a lot of work, there's a lot of challenges that I have to continue to overcome, and I just got to continue to work on, achieving those victories each and every day. So I'm ready and prepared. And, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, but at the same time, I'm excited to be, a starting quarterback in this league, and especially a starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns.
Jason McCourty, you played for 4 teams in the NFL. The Browns were one of them. You know the way this franchise operates. How long will Watson remain QB1?
It's so hard to tell. A lot of that has to do with Deshaun Watson. I look at this conversation and I say, all right, you have 2 games on the road. Your head coach named you the starting quarterback. And the one thing that he said while naming you the starting quarterback, that you play those first games on the road, and they're leaning on the experience and the fact that he is a veteran. If he doesn't perform well on those first 2 games on the road, I think it's very possible that we could see Shedeur Sanders at home in Week 3 versus the Carolina Panthers. I think the leash is that short when it comes to Deshaun Watson, because this was a quarterback battle that the head coach said was very close, and he was pleased and happy with both quarterbacks and how they performed throughout the preseason. For Deshaun Watson, you have to show up on the road. The crowd probably won't be booing you. They might be welcoming you with the fact that they think you're going to stink it up and their team's going to win anyway. You have to go out there and perform. It's been a while since we've seen Deshaun Watson perform at an elite level like he was with the Houston Texans. So yes, as I sit here today, I say it's very possible in Week 3 they could be making the decision to move on from him, because the head coach mentioned playing on the road and reasons why they were going with him as the Week 1 starter.
Yeah, and I think we all realize that the head coach wants to win. Like, Todd Monken has waited a long time to get this opportunity. Like, this is his opportunity to be in charge of a franchise. So Deshaun is going to start those first couple games. I think if they're 1-1 or 2-0, he'll probably start the 3rd game at home, and then we'll take it from there. I think he'll be the starter for the first month of the season. I think it doesn't really matter whether it's 2 games, 4 games, 6 games. I think eventually we all feel like that Shedeur Sanders is going to get his opportunity to show, because the Browns have to figure out. I think it would be probably less than 1% chance that Deshaun Watson is going to be back with Cleveland. Can Shedeur Sanders be back? Sure, depending on how he plays. So if you want to see him on the field in this Todd Monken offense during live game action, he's got to play. So that's the reason why I think we're going to see him. But as far as the Watson of it all, I know it's a big deal, him starting. But in the Cleveland Browns structure, as far as their franchise, where they're headed, this is really not a big deal. Think about this, guys. Take the name Watson out of the way. If you had invested $230 million in something, wouldn't you want a little something back? I mean, just a little something? Well, I mean, just give me anything. I think this is strictly business from the Browns. Let's see if we can get anything back out of this. Hey, Watson, you go apologize. Let's get a little something back. And then once we feel like we've gotten as much juice out of this turnip that we can get, let's move on to Shedeur Sanders.
Before you go, that's the part that's hard for me, because that was March of 2025, where Jimmy Haslam said this was a big swing and a miss when he was talking about the contract and the trade that they did to get Deshaun Watson on their roster. So if ownership is saying 17 months ago that it was a swing and a miss, Boog, at that point, I felt like you got all that you can get out of it, and you're acknowledging that it wasn't enough at that point. So to fast forward a little over a year later to name him as the starting quarterback, like, that's a surprise from the franchise. And I'm with you. Like, for the future of the franchise and everything, naming a week 1 starter for them in this season when you have multiple first-round draft picks coming up, yes, it seems insignificant. But I think for the Cleveland Browns fans, all that you've gone through since acquiring him, and to now name him the starter when everyone watched that second preseason game, and I know a lot more goes into it than just one preseason game, but I think that's the part that's hard when you look at it from the Browns fans' perspective.
I totally agree with you, Jason. I think not only is this a big deal, I think it's a huge deal, and here's why. I think when you're talking about Watson and the fact that he was named the starting quarterback, and right when he's named the starting quarterback, he has to issue a public apology, not for the things you think he's apologizing for, but for something else. And then you factor in, here's the superlatives or the conversation you could put on this. Worst contract in the history of the sport. Worst trade in the history of the sport. The owner, as you mentioned, Jimmy Haslam, saying it's a swing and miss. Does anyone realize he went to Watson's wedding after that? I know that's personal stuff, but if you had a $230 million investment in someone and it was the worst investment in your life, guess what you're not doing? Going to that person's wedding. I can promise you that. But wait, there's more. Here's the unique part about this. I think they have set this up in a way where they have guaranteed themselves that Deshaun Watson will never get booed at home again. How? 2-game sample size. He gets the first 2 games of the season at Jacksonville, at Tampa. The Cleveland Browns fans, as Jason McCourty well knows, are arguably the best fans in the NFL. This may make them the worst, but if he plays well, Watson that is, and he comes home for game 3 as the starter, they will not boo him if he plays well. If he does not play well against Jacksonville and Tampa, he will never play another snap for the Cleveland Browns, and Shedeur will start week 3. That's how this is set up for. It's a 2-week tryout to never get booed again at home. That's what Booger, so I do think this is a big deal because it's also Shedeur's career.
Well, I think that's a bit presumptuous of you to assume that an entire fan base. I honestly think that the fan base is going to boo him regardless. He's going to have to deal with that because the fans are going to want their voice to be heard. But I do think there's a scenario where he can come home at 2-0, and I do think that the echo or the volume of what he heard the other day in that stadium won't be there. But again, this is up to him to control. He has the opportunity to control the narrative. And I think after all Deshaun Watson has dealt with, some of it he brought on himself, some of it was brought on by other factors. If you have an opportunity to control the narrative, because I think at the end of this contract, we're all going to say it was a failure. But how do you start and how do you finish? He started with an 11-game suspension. He has an opportunity to finish it on a high note. And let's not forget, Deshaun Watson is not 40 years old. So we continue to talk about the Cleveland Browns of it all. I think there's still a world where once he leaves Cleveland, he can be a backup quarterback somewhere, if not a low-end starter somewhere. So this is not the end of Deshaun Watson's career. How many guys of lesser talent do we see floating around the National Football League for several years being backup quarterbacks and being kind of journeyman quarterbacks? So Deshaun Watson has to look at this as, I control the narrative leaving Cleveland, but I also control the narrative the rest of my career. That's what's at stake. The Cleveland Browns franchise may be going a different direction in 2027 with the draft or Shedeur Sanders. But where's Deshaun Watson going to go with the rest of his career?
Boog, I think to your point, he's going to have one hell of a season to continue that, because I think the difference is going to be for the Cleveland Browns, once they made that trade and they handed over that contract, like this year, he's still been in the conversation of the competition when it comes to the quarterback because of how much money they're paying him. They can't afford to release him because of the dead cap money. So I think for Deshaun Watson, to your point, for the rest of his career and the longevity of it all, he's going to have to outperform all of the baggage and everything that's come with him For a team to say, hey, we want him as our backup quarterback, they have to feel so comfortable with his ability to help this team win games in the event that their starter goes down, to overcome the backlash and everything that comes along with it. So I think, to your point, the position he's in, whether it's 2 games, 4 games, 6 games, he has an opportunity to go out there and do something he hasn't done in the Cleveland Browns uniform, and that is perform well, and we've yet to see that.
Yeah, I mean, there are 32 teams in the NFL. Only one is giving him the opportunity to be a starter. And I would say if he ever plays past this season in the NFL, only one would give him the opportunity to be a backup. Literally the singular and only team I could even imagine bringing him in as a backup quarterback is one where his name will never be mentioned, and that is Kansas City. That's it. Every other team in the NFL, there's no justification based on his play and based on the conversation around him that he will not overshadow what is going on. There's no chance he overshadows everything in Kansas City. So to me, he has a one-team market.
So you think his career,
Yeah.
So you think his career is done after this season, regardless of what happens in Cleveland, Ev?
So, Booker, let's look at it this way. Let's pretend, let's not get too personal, but let's pretend his off-field is Tim Tebow, like an angel, okay? And then let's also look at his on-field production. Is that guy going to be a backup quarterback? Like, are teams clamoring for that level of production? You said it yourself, and it was a great point by you. Now it's in his hands. Now he can make something out of this. If he doesn't, he becomes, best case scenario, a backup quarterback. Who wants that?
I think there's a scenario where he's a backup quarterback. Let's understand, the backup quarterback, the bar isn't very high. Like, Anthony Richardson is going to be a backup quarterback, and I take Deshaun Watson over Anthony Richardson every day of the week and twice on Sunday. If you go around and look at the backup quarterbacks in the National Football League, he's going to be more talented than a lot of them. But I understand what you're saying, which is the conversation around your backup quarterback may overtake everything else, and some organizations will not want that. But I also agree that these teams have proven that they want the most talented players in their league. And if you have an opportunity to get Deshaun Watson to back up X for $2 million, you're going to take it. I'm not sure the baggage is going to or the conversation is going to override having a quality backup that can give you 3 or 4 starts of decent quarterback play.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Book. I just think his performance this year has to be very overwhelming beyond just backup status. Like, if I'm bringing him in, I have to believe he is almost a starter. It's just because my starting quarterback is that good. I have to believe that he would be a starter on a lot of other teams that maybe just don't want him.
All right, guys, we have a developing story. According to a new study in today's British Medical Journal, nearly 25% of former NFL players who died between 2016 and 2021 had CTE. Researchers say 878 former players died during that 6-year span. They examined the brains of 235 of those former players and found that 215 of them had some level of CTE. CTE is a progressive neurological disease caused by repeated impacts to the head. It can be definitively diagnosed only by examining the brain after death. Studies have shown that the rate of CTE in people who have not sustained repeated impacts to the head is nearly 0. Coming up, both Bill Belichick and Deion Sanders are trying to bounce back after rough years. Which Legends team are we more intrigued to see? And speaking of bounce backs, which player will make a bigger fantasy football comeback? Patrick Mahomes or Saquon Barkley? We bring in fantasy expert Field Yates next on That One.